I'm Catherine Arndt, the Chief of the VLGA Connect studio. Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the VLGA, your counsellor support network and the national broadcaster on all things local government.
It is TGU time. Another Friday rolls around at VLGA Connect. And here in the VLGA Connect studio, we've assembled the A-team again this week. And I want to say hello firstly to Julie Reid, who's with us. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Tony. Great to be back again. It's another big week in local government, as we say.
As it always is. And Tony Raunic from Hunt & Hunt Lawyers, our sponsors and our resident legal eagle. Hello, Tony.
Hey, Chris and Julie. And yeah, there just don't seem to be any slow weeks these days in the sector, do there?
Certainly not as we wind our way unbelievably towards the end of the year. I'm going to start on a serious note. I don't think we need to get into this in great detail. It's certainly been covered in lots of forums at the moment, but the outbreak of hostilities in the Middle East, it's being talked about at the council level. A number of councils around the country, of course, have significant Jewish communities. One of those in Melbourne is Glen Ira, and the Mayor of Glen Ira, Jim McGee, has come out with some pretty strong statements in support of the Jewish community there. Tony, Julie, tough one here. Two sides to every story, of course, and we're seeing that play out on our own streets too, with protests and demonstrations.
Yeah. Understandable, expressions of solidarity in a community like Glen Ira, which is, has a very strong Jewish population. I think the council building was lit up in the Israeli flag colours and expressions of solidarity. And we've seen that across Australia in some other councils. I think in Woollahra, in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, have done something similar and flown the Israeli flag, but not without controversy, as some of the councillors, certainly at Woollahra, were unhappy with that resolution. And we'd have to say, look, it's an horrific situation for both sides, and so many Australians would have connections, both at with Israeli citizens and Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And right now, we've got a hostage situation. We've got missiles. We've got a blockade. We've got a crisis in Gaza, and lives being lost on both sides. And I guess our thoughts go out to all the affected people.
And Chris, I think I can just echo a beautiful statement that was made by Councillor McGee, and that is our focus is on creating a safe and inclusive community. I thought that was spot on, and that's what we want for all of our communities across the world.
As Tony said, though, it can be a divisive issue at Woollahra. Certainly some of the councils didn't agree with that move. I noticed on the figures that Woollahra and Waverley, which is next door, they have between them 30% of the Jewish population in Sydney's entirety. So it is a significant community group for them. Down at Shoalhaven, an urgency motion was moved on Monday night, again about standing in solidarity with Israel, but that motion was not unanimous. It was passed, but it was 9 votes to 2. And up in Queensland, Toowoomba's been lighting up significant buildings in the colours of the Israeli flag. So some strong messaging coming there, and sadly, we're not seeing an end to this anytime soon, are we? This looks like it might drag on for a little while. Let's just leave that one there and note that that is a challenging issue when councils are sort of expected to make public statements on issues that go far beyond their local remit, I guess. A couple of other issues that are proving a bit contentious more locally, the prayer at council meetings. We've talked about the Adelaide situation where they've settled on a compromise with a non-denominational pledge and a multi-faith prayer statement at the start of their meetings. A move to review the use of the prayer at Frankston City Council has failed to get off the ground, Tony.
That's right. Councillor Sue Baker moved a motion at the 2nd of October meeting that was to call for a report into the appropriateness of the current single faith prayer, which is a prayer sort of addressed to Almighty God. What's the purpose of the prayer? What are the practices across other municipalities in Victoria? Were some of the things that her motion was seeking to explore. That motion failed. It was a tight vote. It was 3-3 with 2 abstentions and 1 councillor being, of course, suspended there. And so really it was it failed on the casting vote of the mayor, Councillor Nathan Conroy. He mentioned that he felt the prayer was part of, a rich 70-year history in Frankston and preferred sticking with the status quo. So I think we're about 50-50 across Victoria at the moment in terms of the use of the Christian prayer versus some other pledge or some other sort of indication of councillors wanting to observe standards. It's an interesting one. There is a long history with that sort of Judeo-Christian, if you like, ethic, and then we have, of course, the community has changed substantially over the years. I'm still one for the multi-faith prayer, if you like, where you have a revolving opportunity for leaders of different faiths to come in. I think that helps to kind of promote some level of understanding. It was something that we introduced back at Nillumbik in 1999 when I was presiding there, and I don't know that it still occurs in Nillumbik, but I know councils are grappling with this across the state at the moment. It's not an easy issue.
And in my experience, it's every time you have a change of council, it tends to come up because you get a different group of people often that have differing views and that are also reflecting the changing demographics of that community. Julie?
Yeah, I was going to say that it seems as though it comes around now and again. I mean, although looking at it, it looks like Frankston, the last time they reviewed their prayer was in 1953. So
it's never been reviewed. Basically, it's been in for 70 years.
Yeah. So interesting. I think that if it doesn't happen now, then it might be, it'll come back at some stage. So I think these things are going to be a revolving door consideration by councils until they, get the numbers to shift it potentially. So,
and each community is different. So, those councillors are reflecting the mix in that community at a given point in time. But I've got a governance geek question out of this, Tony. As you mentioned, the casting vote of the mayor. I'm not sure if technically the casting vote was required, but 2 abstentions would have counted as a no vote, should they not, under the legislation, which would have meant it was a 5-3 no vote in effect? Yeah,
that's actually a good point, Chris. That may well have been the case. I'm maybe in error there where I've said it was the mayor's casting vote. Yes, 2 abstentions. So it certainly was a 3-3, 3-5 potential vote against.
Yeah.
All right. Also, while we're on the peninsula, the issue of opening up briefing sessions to the public, this comes up every now and then. And in fact, there's it's escaping me which council. There is one council, it might be Wodonga, that actually does have open briefing sessions. Again, that's been a subject of debate at Mornington Peninsula.
Yeah, it has. I know that Councillor David Gill sought to move in urgent business, I think this week, a motion to open up to the public council or briefing sessions. That motion actually wasn't debated. I think it was ruled by the mayor, Steve Holland, presumably with some advice that the motion didn't comply with council's governance rules. I certainly see the arguments for transparency, but my view would be that it's a bit of a backward step if we lost that opportunity for councillors to ask questions, to explore their understanding of issues in a more private setting. So there's not that grandstanding or that sense of gee, this will sound stupid if I ask this question and the public are listening. That opportunity for better understanding by councillors, and then the actual debate and the decision making is done in a public arena. That would be my view. And I also think that moving something like this as urgent business, I think that there'd be merit in getting, I wouldn't see the urgency here. I think there'd be merit in getting councillors being briefed on officer report, what are the implications of going down this path?
Yeah, I would agree, Tony. I think it wouldn't be an urgent item. you know, you need to have the pros and cons of being able to open up a meeting like that. I do agree with the issue around grandstanding, and you know, these are briefings where there's no decisions that are being made, and it's really to enable councillors to collect all of the information that they need to make a good decision. You know, that over and above what would be potentially in the report, or even just unpacking a report and understanding it at a deeper level, so then they can be comfortable with the vote that they're going to take in the chamber. So I'm not a big fan of this idea. I think there needs to be that confidential setting where councillors and staff feel comfortable in discussing the matters at hand.
And I too would agree with that, as long as councils don't fall into the trap of those briefing sessions becoming de facto decision-making forums, which of course they're not allowed to be. And I wonder at those places, I'm just speculating here, Tony and Julie, where they have opened up briefing sessions to the public. I'd be curious to know what sort of underground process has developed, because there has to be an opportunity for councils to seek that sort of information and clarify things without that public glare on their thinking. Don't you reckon?
Definitely.
One would think, and one imagine that you know, those in Operation Sandon report, IBAC did talk about those what they called pre-council meetings, which were essentially the meetings that take place immediately before the formal council meeting, and their concern that those meetings might be turning into sort of decision making fora. I think I just agree with Julie, and I think yourself, Chris, that we need this opportunity for councillors to have not feel constrained in asking questions, not feel constrained by a public glare sometimes in reaching an understanding of the situation before they then debate and you know, talk about their reasoning.
I think what it probably would end up in, Chris, is there'll be more meetings. So there'll be the briefing meeting, that is the public briefing meeting, and then there would be other meetings.
Some sort of caucusing type meetings. Yeah.
So all it does is generate the requirement probably for more meetings, because there will be some discussions that will need to be had behind closed doors, and that's just the way it operates. It operates like that in government, state government, you know. So you know,
it'll be interesting to see what others think about that, if they have any feedback. The other element I was thinking about as you're talking there, Tony, was reading between the lines here. I think at least a few of the councillors were not expecting this, and it hadn't been discussed amongst the group of councillors. And what we have seen in some cases where councillors bring those sorts of items forward is they just lapse because no one else is prepared to second them, because they haven't had that opportunity to think about it or get a reasoned officer's report on the subject. Yeah,
I agree. I think that there can be, I'm not saying in this case, but there can be a temptation for councillors to move things by way of, you know, notice of motion, urgent business, rather than first couch some of the ideas with their colleagues in a more informal setting, to sort of try and achieve some understanding. But look, I'm sure that in this case, Councillor Gill may well have been driven by a particular issue that might have brought him to the table there, and we'd absolutely be interested in hearing some of the reasoning and hearing from, you know, the local government sector about what do they think about this. How is it working in Wodonga, for example, if that in fact is the case there? Yeah. All right. Thank you to our friends on the peninsula for bringing those very interesting governance issues to the fore this week. And both of those were reported in local newspapers, the Bayside News and the MP News. Another news item that caught my eye was confirmation that the current mayor of Greater Dandenong, Eden Foster, is the Labor-endorsed candidate for Daniel Andrews' old seat of Mulgrave at the upcoming by-election. And Tony and Julie, she's announced she'll be taking a leave of absence to focus on that campaign. Yeah, I'm pleased with that. Sorry, I'm pleased she's taking leave of absence rather than, you know, staying in her position right immediately through to the election.
Yeah. And look, great for her to have that opportunity. I know that she really does love the communities in which she serves at the moment. And, she wants to really make a difference locally. I think it would be an interesting transition and an opportunity for her to focus on how, state government and local government can work better together if she is successful in that role. So we would be having high hopes of her representing, local government at the table. So anyway, we'll see how that goes.
And
She'd have to be-
possibly a two councillor contest there, because Councillor Rona Garrard, I think, has indicated that she'll seek pre-selection for the Greens party there as well. And another sort of name that'd be familiar in these circles is that Ian Cook from I Cook Foods, who of course has some history with the Greater Dandenong Council, is recontesting as an independent. I think he came second last time to Daniel Andrews in the last, in the state election. So that's going to be one of those seats that's going to be really watched from local government people, at least. Yeah.
Well, you'd have to say, I don't want to put the moz on it, but Eden Foster would have to be the favourite going in, given it's a pretty strong Labor seat. That was the premier.
It'd be a safe seat. Yeah, it's very much so.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
All right, we'll keep an eye on that one. I don't think as of yet we've got a date for that by-election. That was certainly the case a few days ago, but I've seen nothing since. Some more stories catching our eyes. Been quite a bit in the media this week. Yarra is the latest council to make a move on cat curfews. They're introducing a nighttime curfew. I think it might be coming in from next year.
Yeah, 1st of Jan 24, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. You have to sort of lock up your moggies if you own a cat. And apparently there's been consultation, of course, here around changes to the domestic animal management plan at Yarra, and overwhelming support, I understand, from the community for this nighttime curfew in terms of cats being, protected from, injury, protecting the ecosystem, of course, as well, and, protected from weather extremes and these sorts of things, was some of the reasoning that council provided for this change.
Julie, I think we're seeing a growing expectation from communities that councils will do something about this issue. More and more, we're seeing this type of outcome, aren't we?
Yeah, that's right, Chris. And there's been councils that have gone down this route before. I suppose the issue that I have is about how is it going to be enforced?
Yeah.
What does this mean for having people available between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. to be able to enforce this kind of control? Look, there are compelling reasons. 5 compelling reasons that are outlined in why we should have these curfews. I absolutely agree with the theory of it, but it's about, what does that mean in practice? So look, no doubt the council have thought about that and will put in place something that they need to do to manage that as best they can. But I think it relies a lot on the community doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Do the right thing. Hopefully there'll be a bit of promotion around it. People will do the right thing and protect the local ecosystem, reduce the risk of injury for their pet. Let's hope that they're sensible about it. Probably most people are anyway. But anyway, look, I think we're seeing more and more of this because of community expectation, and that's
I agree. And I think on the enforcement thing, you're right. It's going to be a very difficult thing to enforce, and I don't think we're going to be seeing phalanxes of council rangers patrolling the streets all night to make sure that the moggies are staying within the bounds of their homes.
Yeah, and it would be interesting to know whether the community expect that. Because that they are expecting more and more with, as you know, we've got less and less. So I think it will be interesting to see how this plays out in practice.
Yeah.
I think there'll be an educational campaign, perhaps.
Yeah.
That will be, probably the key, that over time people perhaps adjust. It's hard to, change the behaviour of your cat. If your cat's 5 years old and it's used to sleeping in the neighbour's tree or something like that. But we'll see this change over time, I would think.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So is make sure your cats are behaving.
Exactly. All right. Not a problem for me. I don't have a cat. Residents without legal representation have scored a win over Ballarat City Council at VCAT. Tony, this must make you shudder.
Oh, so many lawyers are not happy with this. I mean, how are they going to save up enough money for a new S-Class Mercedes or something? I'm just joking. This is people, I'm a Ballarat person, or grew up in Ballarat, of course, but this is Warren Heap. So if you're driving into Ballarat on that Western Highway, you pass the big hill, which is called Mount Warren Heap, where the castle is, Cryall Castle. And so in that vicinity there's been an application for a 111-room hotel, gin distillery, spa and sauna function centre. That was approved by the Ballarat City Council in August of last year. Part of the land sort of zone mixed use, but the land's currently largely used for farmland, I believe, and local residents concerned about the proposed development, the loss of key farmland as well, took that matter to VCAT, and in a decision by Rachel Naylor, she's found that the proposal's not compatible with surrounding land, and the Director of Development and Growth at Ballarat Council, Natalie Robertson's come out and said, well, we acknowledge that there's always an opportunity for members of the public, affected people, to seek a review from VCAT. We'll work with that decision. But big win for that community around Warren Heap.
Absolutely. So all power to the people in that particular case. And I notice the council has said that they respect and accept that decision. So I imagine that's the end of it.
But hard to appeal a VCAT decision like that. You'd have to find a fault in law, which is rare going to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
The Northeast Link Northern packages have been announced, which is providing more detail on that end of the new superhighway that is being described, where it joins with the Western Ring Road. It's not been going down very well with Watsonia people. They say Watsonia will be cut in half by this, and the council seems to agree and is looking for more detail and continuing with what it calls its Lid the Link campaign.
I did see this, and I know this area well. Of course, in the city of Banyule, it's what there are, opportunities. There's crossings that are built over the Northeast Link. In a lot of ways, these roadways, sometimes it's a piece of natural infrastructure, if you like, or a river, the Merry Creek, Darebin Creek, the Yarra River. They become mental barriers for people. People don't cross them, even though there is a practical ability to do that, and that's just a part of people's behaviour, I think. And understandably, I think the Chamber of Commerce in Watsonia is concerned that they might be sort of shutting off a group of residents from access to the shopping facilities, and they'll choose to shop in Greensborough rather than cross the Northeast Link potentially. And I think we will see changes of behaviour regardless, as a result of major infrastructure projects like this. It's just in the nature of people.
Yeah, and I think that Banyule Council have a good opportunity here. There's a design consultation period. They need to probably now just push for some improved outcomes if that can be done. Obviously the designs have come out. have upset the community. You know, is it really the best design that could be developed? Has it been compromised because of budget potentially, which we often see in these kind of developments? But at the end of the day, I think, you know, it has to be, you know, the community has to be well connected, and it has to be an integrated design. And there are a lot of really talented designers out there that will come up with solutions that will meet those needs of the community. So I think that, you know, we saw that through some of the designs of the level crossing removals. We saw how councils pushed to get better designs, better outcomes for their community. So I think that, you know, don't give up, Banyule Council. I know you won't. I think keep pushing for as best an outcome you could possibly get. Make sure that your communities aren't isolated from the services and the facilities that they should have access to. We need to make sure these communities work.
Well said, Julie. I think there is an exhibition period with consultation, but I think I read it's only 3 weeks, which is not a long period of time to get your head around the detail of things like this.
No, that is pretty poor, really, for something so significant that's going to have such an impact on the community. I'm really surprised to see that it's only 3 weeks. You know, local government would be hung, drawn, and quartered having a 3-week consultation on something like that.
Yeah.
You know, minimum would be 4 weeks for local government. So come on, you know, let's give us a chance to be able to have a look at this seriously and sit around the table and work out what solutions could be brought to the table.
Yes, you people, listen to Julie. And
you got me on a soapbox now.
Now, that story was reported in The Age this week. It also had a bit of a roundup of Roundup usage by councils around Melbourne. So I was surprised to read that all Melbourne councils are now confirmed to be still using this glyphosate-based herbicide. 3 had stopped for a while, Brimbank among them. I think Port Phillip another, but
Frankston.
apparently was it right? And it's just been shown to be not as the other methods are not as effective. I believe communities have been complaining about weed growth, overgrown verges, etc. So Roundup's back in use, which of course is a concern for many, given the jury's not completely in, but given major concerns about its health impacts potentially.
Chris, this has been an issue for councils for a number of years. I remember when I was working as the Director of Engineering Services at one of the Southeast councils. You know, we were debating this with the councillors at the time, and it was so it was so expensive. It was, you know, maybe, I don't know, 3 or 5 times more expensive, maybe even more than that. I can't remember exactly the detail, to be able to do use different methods, like, for example, steam weeding, which was what was popular at the time as an alternative. But it was, you know, the cost of it was just phenomenal, and councils were just really struggling with that space. But also, not only was it a huge cost, there was the issue of that it wasn't as effective. And so you would get those, you know, complaints more regularly, because you know as much as I do how much people don't like weeds and how much people don't like long grass. You know, it's they expect the council to provide a quality service. So this is a really tough one for councils to decide, because there's a kind of a moral dilemma in all of this, and they try to turn to understanding the scientific side of things to say, well, can we justify it based on scientific evidence? But you know, so until there is a really suitable alternative, I think you're going to find that the councils will have no choice but to stay with glyphosate. So.
And the pressure is just going to continue to mount, because other places are banning it completely. So Vietnam, I think, Germany, there's a complete ban coming in very soon, parts of the US. So we
can still buy it at Bunnings. You know, I'm glad we're not filming this in my garden shed, folks. You might see some things. But look, there are a number of cases against Monsanto in the US that are, you know, they tend to be actions brought by agricultural workers, you know, people who are, very regularly exposed to the chemical, and so I can appreciate why people in parks and gardens and those sorts of areas of councils would have some concerns about impacts like this. But as it's been said, that there's the scientific evidence is not conclusive at the moment, and the Australian authorities certainly allow you can buy some form of Roundup, at your local hardware store right now. I think Monsanto was bought out by Bayer, which is the big German company. So really interesting if it's being banned in Germany.
Yeah.
The entity that owns the chemical, but I think we'll see this issue explored over years, and as Julie says, there's someone trying to invent an efficacious solution to this.
Another one to put in that wicked problem column, Julie and Tony. Lots more to get to. Let's whip through a few of these stories just to update people. The Premier Sustainability Awards finalists have been announced. Great to see 9 councils leading the way in this list of finalists for this year's awards, which will be announced in November. Yeah,
lots of councils, and really range of programs. I saw Yarra and Marybeck there with their Unlocking Sustainable Strata program. So, clean energy to apartments and townhouses was that program. Yarra Ranges, Knox and Maroondah have partnered with their local library service to provide energy and water saver kits, and they're a nominee. Darebin with their Darebin Loves Bikes program, and I noticed when I catch the train in the morning, some mornings we see these free monthly bike check programs in the park near the station there, and skills workshops, etc. Brimbank, the Brimbank Aquatic and Wellness Centre is 100% renewable energy powered. Hobson's Bay for a My Smart Garden, sustainable garden program, and finally Hume City Council for their Hume Enviro Champions program, which is some community training around how you can locally impact on the positively on your environment. So yes, quite a number of councils up for consideration for awards announced on the 23rd of November.
Yes, there'll be an awards ceremony, and the Hobson's Bay one, I think it's the lead council for a group of other councils that are sitting in behind that particular project. So well done to all of those. Great to see, Julie.
Yes, fantastic. Yeah, it's inspirational. We'll be really keen to see who gets the gong and gets the recognition from the Premier when it comes up.
Before I get to some of the week's announcements in what I'm going to call the Arrivals and Departure Lounge, you'll find this one interesting, Julie. Queensland has followed on from Victoria's recent housing and planning reform statement by announcing a range of reforms that would be about to go through Parliament, I assume, proposed and introduced this week to unlock housing and land supply. Some implications for councils in this too.
That's right, Chris. And it's interesting because, it rings exactly the same as what we're hearing in Victoria. Housing and land supply pipelines will be streamlined to deliver more homes faster for Queenslanders under the revamp of the planning framework, they're saying. So they're actually looking at the Housing Availability and Affordability Bill, introducing that into Parliament, and they're going to amend the Planning Act 2016 to improve the response to those housing supply challenges. So there's a raft of new measures they're bringing in, cutting barriers. So it all rings true. It'd be interesting to watch that one to see how it goes. But it could be very similar to what we're experiencing here. They're putting in a new assessment pathway for development and a new land use zone called the Urban Investigation Zone, enabling councils to better manage development in growth areas. So, yeah, interesting.
Summarised very well there, Julie. Okay, so that detail is online for anyone who wants to dig into it a little bit deeper. Okay, we've reached the Arrivals and Departures Lounge for this week, folks, and we've got a couple of both arriving at Moira Shire Council very soon. On the 23rd of October will be someone well known to all of us. Michael Tudball has been appointed as the acting CEO for a period of 6 months while a recruitment process is underway, and the position's being advertised as we speak. Nick Kelly at Gem Executive has got the gig to find Moira's new CEO.
Yes, that's great news. We know that Michael has been busy in these executive backfill roles recently, and I know that he'll do a great job up at Moira.
Sure will.
Supporting the staff up there.
Former CEO at Southern Grampians, of course, an interim at Corangamite, and recently has been filling in as an interim director at Hindmarsh. So he's getting to know all the corners of the state, is Tuddy. Also arriving at West Wimmera Shire is a new councillor. We talked about this last week, Tony. We had the resignation there, and this is one of those cases where there was only one eligible candidate remaining from the last election.
That's right, and Richard Hicks, new councillor, has put in his confirmation that he's still eligible to serve as a councillor. So he takes the position that Councillor Trevor Damasenge had before he retired. If there are any more departures from West Wimmera, that will require a by-election.
So that one's resolved very quickly. Not sure about this next one. This came in after we'd recorded last week's program, and Julie had committed to the record that she didn't think we'd see any more resignations between now and the
you would bring that up
next year. But we had one almost immediately. Well, in fairness, Julie, this one had already happened. We just didn't know about it. It just hadn't filtered through.
I'm too optimistic. That's my problem.
We were about 24 hours behind, I think, this announcement that Anne Moore has resigned at Macedon Ranges Shire Council with immediate effect. And this one is for health and family reasons. So we wish her all the best. And we're waiting to hear on what process is going to be needed to fill that vacancy, noting that we're now less than 12 months from the caretaker period at least, and from the election, which is about 12 months and 2 weeks away.
Yes, and I'm not going to be putting on any bets about any more changes.
All right. That concludes the Arrivals and Departures Lounge visit for this week. The next round of electoral representation review reports are coming. This is round 3, Tony, and we've got some of the bigger metropolitan councils in this round, starting with Brimbank. I think we'll see the preliminary report for Brimbank next week.
Yeah. So groups 8, 9, and 10, which, as you say, covers a number of large Melbourne metros: Brimbank, Hobsons Bay, Marybeck, Moonee Valley, Maribyrnong, Melton, Mornington Peninsula, Whittlesea, Casey, Hume, and Wyndham. Sorry, folks, to race through, but there's a lot there.
As I said, some of the big ones in terms of population and growth, aren't they?
Yeah. So what will happen is over the course of this month and into next month, there'll be online public information sessions that people can register for and join. There will, of course, be the opportunity for submissions from the public, from councils throughout October and November. And I think those submissions will largely close in November. So councillors, people interested in electoral boundaries, check out the Electoral Representation Advisory Panel, full-page adverts in a lot of the Metro dailies this week, and Google Electoral Structure Review, and you'll see the information.
Is there a trend that you're both seeing around still moving towards single ward council situations?
Yes,
is that's
still the expectation, the default position.
Yeah, that's right. So most of those, all of those that you've talked about would already be multi-member wards. So they're already subdivided in terms of having wards. There are still councils in the rural areas that are unsubdivided, and whether or not they're going to be forced into being subdivided with single member wards is the question, really. Because I think it has been that expectation for a while. I hadn't heard much about whether it was continuing on the same line under the current
the terms of reference, and I did have a chat with someone from the VEC back at the start of the process, have been very clear that they're working within the confines of what the legislation says, which is that single member wards would be the default position unless there's some very successful argument as to why that wouldn't apply in some cases. Tony, I don't think we've seen any of the outcomes yet. I think a number of final reports must be sitting with the minister, and we're yet to see the upshot of any of those processes.
That's right. And there's certainly some level of opposition from councils. There's certainly councils that have put in submissions both for changes to proposed boundary arrangements, but also, as you say, to hold to some, shire wide often representation arrangements as well, or a mix. Some of them have a mix, some shire wide, some not.
So is it mainly a predetermined outcome, and there's extraordinary circumstances, as you say, that will shift them away from having single member wards? Will be interesting to see the outcomes of those, I think. And
I guess where the variation can be is how those wards are structured, where the lines are drawn, and we've seen some maps which have shown some pretty interesting arrangements, and that challenge of getting the voter number per representative right. I think that's where the focus, someone might correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's where the main focus of the panel it obviously is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Also having those like communities grouped together as well.
Communities of interest, as they say. That's right. Yeah. All right. So the jury is still out on any of those outcomes. Now, you've both added a few things to the list this week that you wanted to talk about. Tony, can we start with your pick of the week? Because I think you're going to take us to Paris, aren't you?
Yes, that's right. We've got a new suburban lobby group in Melbourne this year. YIMBY Melbourne, Yes in My Backyard Melbourne, was launched this year. And as you say, the spokesperson, Jonathan O'Brien, was in the media this week saying, we could have in Melbourne Paris's streets, Amsterdam's bikes, and Berlin's vibes.
Oh.
So long as we embrace these key parts of those cities, iconic urban designs. And YIMBY Melbourne is calling for the development of Melbourne's missing middle to enable, things like 6-story mixed-use developments on residential land within a kilometre of a train station, within 500 metres of a tram stop. They're even proposing that there should be as of right provisions for residential development in residential zones in the metro area, provided that 10% of the resulting housing stock is transferred to a public or community housing provider. So, just another group that's sort of added to that fabric of people with an interest in outcomes in planning, and people obviously agitating to councils in relation to what approach they should take in racially enabled character and that. Yeah,
nicely timed post the announcements about housing from the government. In the housing work they've been doing, and it sounds like it rings very much aligned with the housing announcement recently. So interesting.
I haven't gotten into the
story.
Yeah, I haven't gotten into the detail of this. There's a very nice looking website they've got for YIMBY Melbourne, which is worth looking at. But isn't it refreshing, though, to hear a positive take on these challenges about what might be done to deliver those sorts of outcomes, rather than the negative, not, as the NIMBY name implies, not in my backyard, great idea, go and do it somewhere else. It's refreshing, isn't it?
Yeah,
it is refreshing.
It'd be interesting to see. I just look, where do they get their funding from? I'm not suggesting, but let's. Who are they?
Oh, okay. You're asking.
I'm not saying they're astroturfed or anything, but let's be. Where's this? Where have they come from? This group? They could well be a group of. I know there's a number of academics in planning that have been calling for these sorts of measures for some time. But it'd be interesting to in the interest of disclosure to know, where they've arisen from.
All right.
We may not ever know. But anyway.
Need to dig a little beneath the surface there. Yeah, good point, Tony. Now, Julie, you've got a couple of things to tell people about, which I think are of great interest to the sector.
Yes, yes. Thanks, Chris. So, first of all, the peri-urban councils have brought to our attention that the Australian government is seeking feedback on possible policy changes to improve mobile connectivity in new developments and other measures to improve fixed voice and broadband services. So, we know that Victoria has its issues around connectivity. It is a shame in the current space that we're in and the expectations that we're expected to work in a very high-tech environment. So this is a great opportunity for councils to have a look at this, feedback some thoughts to the Australian government. You'll have to get your skates on though. The submissions close on the 8th of November. So have a look at that. We can put the link in there for everybody to go to the Australian government's website. So just a heads up on that, and thanks to the peri-urban councils for bringing that to our attention. The other thing which was interesting, which was, and I'm not 100% certain about what the outcomes will be, but there's been this grant that's been given to the South East Monash Legal Service. Now, this is a legal service that's based in Springvale and Narre Warren out in the southeast of Melbourne. And they're going to explore not just the impact on climate change in daily lives, but also how it will play out with everyday legal issues. Now, Tony, you might understand this more than what I do, but I'm trying to get my head around what this all means. So the work is being done at the moment on disaster management, disaster preparedness, including floods and fire. But they're saying that the idea of this project is to explore how climate change feeds into these community issues. And they've got this grant of, it's $500,000. So it's a lot
significant.
I know. So they're going to look at things like the legal aspect of inadequate heating and cooling facilities in social housing, and landlords providing insufficient heating. Tenants may be on a social welfare payment or low-income earner, so we'll start to see or tease out different cases where there's a causal link to the climate. So, and they're also talking about, domestic violence, and expected to be heightened during this time of extreme climate conditions, which I thought was really interesting piece of research. So,
and there's some council involvement here, isn't there?
Yes,
Really?
yes. So Greater Dandenong, City of Casey and Cardinia are all part of this project. So we would love to hear from those three councils about the project, because I think it seems really interesting, and I'm wanting to understand what kind of benefit those councils are going to potentially get from someone independent getting funding that they're going to work with. So an interesting case and an interesting fund that we probably were never aware of.
Can I say that money comes from the Victorian Legal Services Board, which ultimately comes from people like me paying for our admission and for our staff's admission to practice every year. Julie, I'm not sure either, but where our $500,000 is going here. I did see this conversation about, the impact of climate change on, would we, if we have to spend 500 grand to tell us that we need, if the climate gets warmer, we'll need better aircon and ventilation in houses. I don't know that's a good use of the money, but I guess we'll see some of the outcomes of this. The domestic violence one was interesting for me. Are we saying that, there's less domestic violence in, I don't know, Glasgow and St. Petersburg because the climate's cooler? I guess that's not what they're saying. But look, I'm just interested to know what we get for our 500 grand.
Yeah,
it's an interesting pickup, Julie. I notice you've got this from the Berwick Star News, which has reported on it. My take is it's putting a legal lens across climate change impacts. So how are climate change impacts being represented in the way the legal system operates, which on the surface sounds pretty complex.
That's why I'm
yeah,
out of it.
Anyway,
right. Yeah.
As you say, it'd be interesting to get the council's take on this. I've not seen any PR out of those councils about it. I'll have a dig around after we finish with this episode, or reach out, and we'll keep an eye on it. Good one, Julie. I've got a pick of the week for you both. This is creating a bit of discussion over in Europe, where Malta, one of the smallest members of the European Union, has announced this week through their local government minister that they're going to change legislation to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to be elected to positions of mayor or deputy mayor at any of the 68 councils that exist in Malta. Malta must be a bit bigger than I pictured in my mind, because 68 councils sounds like a lot.
It does, doesn't it, Chris? But don't they have the right to be councillors now, don't they? 16 and 17.
They do, but they don't have the right to be elected mayor or deputy, and that's the change I think that's being flagged.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because wouldn't that possibly be discriminatory if you're allowed to become a councillor, but you're not allowed to become a mayor or a deputy mayor because you're 16 or 17? I mean, I just say, let them go for it. I mean, I think this is remarkable. I am absolutely blown away by the youth today and how sophisticated they are and how much knowledge that they have, even at the age of 14. Let alone 16, 17. So I think this is terrific. I kind of had a chuckle to myself, I must admit, but I have a 14-year-old son, and I know I have some interesting conversations with him, and he can be very smart and really debate a lot of issues. So I'd say let the 16, 17-year-olds take on a leadership role. Grow their leadership skills, as long as the councils support them in that role to build up those skills and, become leaders of the future.
I guess if they're putting their hand up to be a councillor in the first place, they're politically active teenagers. So you're right. What's the point of barring them from actually having leadership roles? What's your take, Tony? Because I notice in the community over there, it's not gone down that well.
Yeah, look, I wonder, I don't know the rules there, but are they eligible to own land and be ratepayers? I mean, I'd be a little perturbed by the idea that people who might be voting on the rates, setting the rates when they don't actually have any ability to pay rates. Now they may be entitled to own land in Malta at 16 or 17. I don't know the answer to that. I wouldn't be advocating like in the States, where I think you've got to be, is it 35 to run for president or something?
I think so.
There's an age that it's extraordinary. So there is that discrimination based on age in some countries. Still, I'm probably not as convinced at the moment.
Well, you would appear to be in the early majority, because the Times of Malta ran an online poll when this was announced, and it's had 97%, not scientific, of course, but 97% opposition to it. But this jumped out at me. Someone online said, so a 16-year-old mayor would be able to officiate a marriage, but he needs his parents' permission to himself get married at that age. Think about that.
But they could bring a different dimension. Really, they could. Come on, we've got it.
No argument there, Julie. Absolutely, a different dimension.
But we have to finish the meeting. I've got to go home and do my homework.
Yes. I thought you were telling us to wrap up TGU because you've got homework to do, Tony. No, but that is just about all we had for this week. I want to give a couple of plugs for some upcoming VLGA activities. If you haven't already registered, there's 2 webinars coming up next week on Thursday, one for Children's Week, which is on that topic, I guess, that we've just been talking about, ensuring that children have a voice and can participate in processes that lead to decisions that impact them. That'll be a fascinating discussion on Thursday. The first in a series on housing in Victoria comes your way on Friday, effective leadership in housing. So make sure you're registered to be part of those lunchtime webinars. A new local leaders drop this week with the mayor of Melton, Lara Carley, who I had a fascinating chat with. She's the only councillor I've spoken to who has been the mayor of 2 different municipalities in her local government career. So have a listen or watch that. And coming next week, Jackie Weatherall joins us, the CEO of Greater Dandenong City Council, as our next guest on Local Leaders. I hope you two have caught up with those episodes so that you're in the know.
Just about. Not
Things
quite.
to do.
But
Things to do, says Tony. All right.
Got to vote tomorrow too, folks. Remember, we have to vote.
Yes,
I
yes.
know.
I'm going to be in the car, so I have pre-poll voted quite legitimately. I have to declare.
And
All right.
why is it that everybody talks about the sausage? You know, at the voting station, everybody's worried about getting their sausage at the voting station. So
I must admit that hasn't been a discussion. Hasn't been a discussion in my house, Julie.
If you can't get it at Bunnings, you've got it when you're going down
democracy sausage, they call it.
Democracy sausage.
The famous. It's often been used as the reason why in-person voting, attendance voting should be favoured over postal voting, because people don't get their democracy sausage.
A lot of scouts groups and that rely on that. You know, it's probably the big fundraiser.
Yeah, it's the joyful part of turning up to your local voting station and talking to the people behind the tables that are normally community people that are wanting to make a difference. So it's the joy for your morning, getting the sausage and supporting your local community group.
Make sure you get your sausage then, Julie. We're going to wrap this up. That's been a bumper edition. Lots to talk about as always. Keep an eye out for more coming from VLGA Connect, and we'll have the team back together. Hopefully everyone's right to go next week for more TGU from VLGA Connect. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Julie. Bye for now.